Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Richard. I'm just going to introduce you and then hand over.
Okay.
Sorry, embarrassingly, by reading out your biography, no one really likes that, but I have to anyway.
Okay, fair enough.
Richard Phoenix is an artist whose practice includes painting, music, writing, and collaboration. His current interests include looking at access, learning, and structure, and how art and music can create spaces that remove barriers and make new forms of normal. He looks to create nuanced and impactful ways to evaluate and communicate his role in different collaborations. As an associate artist within learning disability arts organisations, a musician within D.I.Y punk bands, working with school groups within an arts institution, as a student within non-institutional arts education. Recently a part of the Conditions studio program in Croydon, he also works for the learning disability arts organisation Heart and Soul as their associate artist. He was an artist in residence with Tate's Schools and Teachers Department, founded the not-for-profit organisation Constant Flux, and wrote D.I.Y as Privilege and Manifesto, which was published by Rough Trade Books in 2020. Thanks so much for being with us today, Richard, and I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Cool. Thank you for asking me to do this. Um, yeah, it's really good to be here. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Just before we start, to calm my nerves as much as anybody else's, well, actually, no, before that, I'm just going to talk through quickly what I'm going to do today, just so you know. So I'm just going to do like about 40 minutes talking around kind of like my journey to get where I am now, doing the sort of job that I'm doing and the work that I'm making. And to just give you a bit of context to that work, because I don't know if everybody will be familiar with like learning disability arts. And then we'll take like a 10-minute break. And then after that, I'll just talk about kind of like the work I'm doing now, and a bit about how we've actually been working sort of during the pandemic, so like for the last like 20 months or something. And then we'll have like a short break, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end. So I hope that all sounds okay. So I'm just going to share my screen. And here we go. So actually, I'm just going to copy this. So what I've done is my talk is a kind of series of prompts for myself with some videos and pictures and kind of like notes that I put within my website. And I can put that link in the chat now. And so you have all those videos and kind of information at your fingertips. I stole this idea off an artist called Abba Sahidi, and hopefully it's quite useful if you miss anything. Yeah, and also if you have any questions as we go, like yeah, please do put them in the chat. I'll try and monitor it, and then also if I'm skipping over things that like or knowledge that I take for granted, please do say, and I can elaborate on things because yeah, I don't always know if I'm just like taking things for granted. So okay, so just before we start, I'm just going to play this video to hopefully just sort of be a nice refresher. I don't know if you've had stressful days or not, but yeah, we'll just play this.
Music keeps me calm. Listen to the music I made by humming. It makes me feel calm. One breath in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breath in, breathe out. Now I want everybody to stretch to the left, to the right, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers. Thank you for listening. Enjoy hanging out.
Okay. That was a video made by somebody that I work with called Michael. Okay, so hello, I'm Richard Phoenix. I'm an artist and I paint, draw, write, make music and learn about how these things can help people be together. And I have worked supporting people with learning disabilities and autistic people to make and share their art and music for over 15 years. And just some context on language and kind of like the reasons why I use the language I do. So I use the term disabled person, and I can go into a bit of why later, and then autistic person, and then person with a learning disability. And then the terms neurodivergent, which is an individual who is not neurologically typical, i.e. an autistic person or someone with ADHD, which I am, and neurodiverse, which is a group of people where some of the members of that group are neurodivergent. Yeah, so if you have any questions around that now or later, then yeah, do ask. So yeah, my journey started with playing in bands from 1997. So when I was like 16, I started playing in bands with friends and got involved with local like punk scenes in Watford and London, and predominantly played the drums in those bands. And it's a picture of one of them. It's a band called Sauna Youth that I sang and played drums in, and that's Jennifer Clare, who's also singing in it. And most of the bands have been, or projects, have been like D.I.Y bands, so embracing a D.I.Y ethic, involved with D.I.Y scenes. So just another little note on what I mean by that. Apologies if this is patronizing, but I think it's quite useful to go into these things. So D.I.Y stands for do it yourself. And in music, it promotes the idea that anyone is capable of becoming a musician and sharing their music. It empowers individuals and communities, encouraging alternative approaches when faced with obstacles to achieving their objectives. Yeah, so that meant, I mean, for the bands that I was in, that we recorded a lot of our own music, that we released like tapes and CDs and records ourselves, or with labels that were kind of a similar mindset. So typically like not for profit. And then we would also organize our own tours. We would organize gigs locally to sort of support a scene of musicians. And yeah, we would tour as well. So I managed just sort of off the back of kind of, yeah, kind of work, like sort of putting things together ourselves, like gone to, yeah, like America and Canada, Japan, Eastern Europe, Russia, like mainland Europe. And yeah, kind of got to have some like really incredible experiences from being able to travel so much and do all these things. And it also like really helped in terms of just like learning about how to interact with people and kind of making music and exposing ourselves to like lots of different ways of doing things. And then, so I did that for a very long time, dropped out of university to do it. And then I moved to Brighton and around 2006, and I started volunteering for an organization called Carousel, and they supported artists with learning disabilities. And up to this point, I didn't really have much exposure to what that meant or who those people are. And I went to a club that they organized called the Blue Camel Club, and it was a night, like the tagline is like for and by people with learning disabilities. And so the DJs that performed were people with learning disabilities, and the bands that played had members like musicians with learning disabilities and autistic people. And there was a band that played called Beat Express, and this was the first time that I'd ever seen a band with like disabled people in it, and it was incredible. I like just one of the best gigs I've ever been to, and just sort of really like, you know, light bulb moment of just like, this is incredible. Why haven't I seen this before? Because I think, you know, I felt like I was socially engaged. I was really into music. I was kind of like tried to keep on top of like, you know, sort of things that were going on, but I just never heard of like a band like this or like a scene or anything like that. And I was kind of like interested as to why that was. And essentially this moment has sort of spurred on essentially what I've done for the last 15 years, which was like, how do you get these bands, you know, the space and time to play more, like make more music, and be seen by people, and kind of be seen by people that aren't like, not, you know, like by mainstream to audiences, not just like clubs where it's predominantly just people with learning disabilities, who might not actually even like the band. They might just want to be there like to dance to the records that are being played. So yeah, I'll play a little bit of Beat Express now.
Like this. Bop like this. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Cool it down. Now eat it up. Eat it up. Eat it up. We got to eat it up. Eat it up. Eat it up. We got to eat it up. Eat it up. Eat it up. We got to eat it up. Eat it up. Eat it up. We got to eat it up. Spirit.
Okay. So you get the idea of what they sounded like. So this is actually not a picture of Beat Express, but a picture of a band called Zombie Crash, who I carried on volunteering with Carousel and then eventually like working with them because of the experiences I had of being in DIY bands. Like I thought I had no qualifications, but actually I'd learned a lot about how to organize things through being in those bands. And I kind of essentially took all those skills and, yeah, as I say, I like tried to bring some of what I learned from being in DIY bands to support these musicians that I knew, worked with, and others that I was discovering. So I started helping more bands to form through Carousel. We started organizing more gigs, started a night in Brighton called the Rock House, which is still going to this day. Like it's over 10 years old now. And that was like every month, essentially creating stage time for like artists with musicians with learning disabilities, and yeah, just basically trying to create a space for them. So just seeing, and yeah, and then I sort of started getting more and more into it. I started an organization. Well, I heard this band from Finland called Partikurkan Nimi Päivät, and they're, or like abbreviate to PKN. And this is a picture of them here. And it was like just an incredible punk band. And I'd heard them and just instantly fell in love, got in contact with them and started learning more about them. And I sort of took upon this like mission that I needed to bring them over to the UK to go on tour. But I just really wanted them to play punk shows, because that was kind of a world that I was involved with. I was like, could think of like 100 bands that would be amazing to see them play with, and it's kind of audiences that would appreciate them, because I felt that if maybe they played like learning disability clubs, it might be an audience that wouldn't necessarily appreciate just like actually how good they are as a punk band. And yeah, so I started an organization so I could then apply for Arts Council funding, and managed to get 10 grand out of the Arts Council to bring a Finnish punk band to go on tour in the UK with Zombie Crash, a metal band. And yeah, it was kind of very life-changing experience being able to just sort of bring kind of these two worlds that I've been involved with. So like the world of like learning disability arts, and then like the DIY punk world, and sort of I was putting on bills with bands with and without learning disabilities in a space, and engaging with both those audiences and kind of like adjusting the way that I sort of spoke to those audiences, I suppose. And yeah, it was a really incredible like experience, and I did like 4 tours through that organization. And here's a little film I want to play you about one of the tours that I did with a band called the Fish Police, who are supported by the organisation I now work for. And also the musical director for Grace Jones is in the band as well. So.
Attention, attention. This is an announcement. The Fish Police are in the area. Please make your way to the dance floor in a disorderly fashion. Jump up and down. Jump up and down. Everyone jump up and down. Jump, jump, jump up and down. Come on, everyone jump up and down. Jump up and down. Everyone jump up and down. Jump up and down. Everyone, we are Fish Police. We're not here to keep the peace. Like chicken on rice. That tastes so nice. We are the Fish Police. We're not here to keep the peace. Just from Japan. With a fake time. Chicken on rice. Tastes so nice. Chicken on rice. Tastes so nice. Chicken on rice. Tastes so nice. Chicken on rice. Everyone jump up and down. Jump up and down. Jump up and down. Jump up and down.
We're Ravioli Me Away.
We played with the Fish Police this evening, and we were their supporting act.
Best gig we've been to for actually ages.
We are Fish Police.
That's all that needs to happen, isn't it? You know, that people like what you do. Doesn't matter what ability or disability you might have. If people enjoy what you do, then that's fantastic.
And that's what's exciting about it, to see people making accessible, exciting danceable music that reflects something about who they are as people.
Particularly good gig, especially having live rhythms as well. Guys delivered, the audience loved it, hands in the air, it was all going on.
Everyone was dancing, the first time I've seen people dancing for a band in the class. Brilliant.
Yeah, the gig was so good, and apparently Swansea was the best show of the tour, which I hope to believe is true.
Attention. All those who are standing still will be rounded up and dealt with severely. Raise the roof. Jump anyone, jump anyone, jump anyone.
Yeah, so that's the Fish Police. They don't, unfortunately, they don't play anymore, but the singer Dean has a solo, very, very prolific solo career. And you can find him on Bandcamp, Dean Rodney Jr. .bandcamp.com. I can send that link on. Yeah, so I kind of did Constant Flux, and kind of throughout all this time I was thinking about all the nuances of the way that was like supporting these things to happen and sharing it, and the way that it talked about it, and the kind of ethics behind it, and the reasons, and my position within it. And I always wanted to write something to try and communicate a bit more about what it was that I thought I was doing. But also kind of, I really wanted to engage with like the scene that I came from. So like D.I.Y. sort of punk, and really talk to that scene, kind of almost asking the question of like, you know, it's a very socially engaged sort of, I'd say, scene typically, you know, it's be exposed to lots of like conversations around like, you know, anti-sexist, anti-racist, anti-homophobic kind of sort of conversations going on. But it was sort of interesting that, say, anti-ableist or like ableist conversations never really came in, and there wasn't much talk around access or like that sort of stuff. And so I sort of pitched this thing to the Goldsmiths Fringe and Underground Musics group. They were doing a series of publications, and I called it D.I.Y.'s Privilege 13-Point Manifesto for Musicians. And it was a one-page print designed to talk, as I say, like directly to DIY scenes I was part of, for them to consider access and think about who was not in the room and not on stage and what they could do about it. So just another note on language is that privilege, I sort of see it as the idea that advantages are available only to certain people in society. So it was this idea that the DIY punk world that I came from was actually a very privileged space. I like realized that through working with a lot of people where there was a lot of support needed to make band practices happen. So we're raising, like there's fundraising to get to pay for practice spaces. There was like, we were transporting people to and from practices. We were supporting people with like setting up instruments, and kind of like getting groups of people that maybe had like communication barriers to be able to communicate together, to be able to write songs. And there was all this idea that all of that stuff was supporting people to do it themselves, but there were just these additional structures in place for them to be able to create. And that all the privilege that I had in terms of being able to ring up my friends, like just meet at a practice space, pay for it with our own money, you know, record songs, get access to, you know, it'd all be done cheaply, but we still had access to these resources, and then also the knowledge that we could do these things. So there's, this is the manifesto. This is the second version. Changed some language in it this time around, but, you know, the aesthetic of it, I wanted it to look like it could be a sort of photocopied zine or something like that. So it's from kind of that same world. And I think got time just to read through it. Maybe I'll do so the website version is here. Okay. So this can be read by screen readers. Okay, so number 1 is see the privilege in being able to do it yourself. 2, disabilities can be visible and invisible. Physical barriers and lack of understanding can exclude people. Think about how you can help remove barriers. It's a quote from the writer Rebecca Solnit. Using privilege to dismantle privilege, one of the best ways to use your voice is to amplify voices that aren't being heard. And number 4, do it yourself can mean different things to different people and is a misleading term. It can mean you still work with people that record your music, people that make and sell your records, people that own the buildings you rehearse in, people that put on gigs just as much as music facilitators, which I was and am, support workers, or transport to and from a gig. Number 5, be a supportive tool, be patient, listen, give people control. 6, they're catching me on my weak points, but not on my strong points. So that's somebody who I know, and his sort of the way that he thought about Job Centre Plus. And you should catch people's strong points. 7, don't assume what's accessible, ask and learn. 8, disabled people performing at or attending gigs shouldn't be exceptional. The more it happens, the more normal it becomes. Make it the norm. 9, there is an audience for everything, and ideas of what is good music will always be political. 10, everyone, regardless of ability, can contribute to a music scene. Use existing support networks to get people on stage and in the audience. Disability arts charities, organisations and support. 11, turn up and keep turning up. Sometimes when supporting people, being consistent is more impressive than being spectacular. 12, the more invisible you make yourself, the more visible others will be. 13, disabled people have senses of humour too. Laugh with people and enjoy yourself. So that was the original manifesto that I wrote. And just to give a bit of context to the way that I use the word disability, and this explains why I use the term disabled person as well. So I use the social model of disability, which is the idea that it is the environment, society and culture that surrounds someone that creates barriers and obstacles which disable and exclude them. So the reason why you would say disabled person rather than person with a disability, using the term like person with a disability places the sort of onus on them, and there's something that's inherent in them as a person. Whereas disabled person means that person is being disabled. So I guess the most straightforward example is, say, if a wheelchair user was trying to get into a venue and there wasn't a ramp, there was steps, but there was not a ramp into the space, then the mobility issue is the barrier of mobility is sort of taken away through the virtue of the fact that they have a wheelchair. The thing that's disabling them is the lack of a ramp into that space. So if there's a ramp, then essentially you're removing those barriers and not disabling that person. So that's like very focused on physical like barriers, but then sort of you can tease that out into lots and lots of different aspects of the world and the way that things can really contribute to people being excluded. So the way that information is presented, the way things are talked about, the language that's used can all contribute to people being excluded. Even the idea of D.I.Y, having rules about what you can and can't do, what is punk, what isn't, can exclude people from actually participating in those sort of things. I did that, the 13-point sort of manifesto, and then I pitched it to Rough Trade Books as an expanded version, so kind of going a bit deeper into each of those points and teasing out personal experiences, people that I've known or met or supported, and kind of giving a bit more of like context as to why I'm sort of saying these things. And also I wanted to try and like really put across that I'm not trying to speak on behalf of disabled people. Like I'm trying to speak on like behalf of myself and the experiences that I've had and the things that I've learned, and trying to kind of like pass on a bit of that and try and, you know, I've had like such an incredible experience working within this world. Like it's completely shifted the way I like, you know, I think about the entire world, shifted the way I think about making music, shifted the way I think about creativity in general. That I kind of like feel like it's a real gift to me. And so it's one of these things where it's like, I think everybody should have the opportunity to have that gift, I suppose. And one of the big issues I think with disability is like, there's a lot of fear around it, of doing the wrong thing, especially. And that kind of stems from like ignorance, but that ignorance is really like put upon us because people are excluded, and it kind of can be a very like silent part of society because kind of people are, you know, kept on the outside. So yeah, this is kind of like the pamphlet here, teal and grey. And I would just like to read chapter 9, which is the point, there is an audience for everything, and ideas of what is good music will always be political. So I've got that as a PDF on here. So I'm just going to open that. So it's just this one section. So zoom in. Can you see that okay? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so it starts with a quote by the sort of artist and writer John Berger, which says, "Every art form is intimately related to a type of life experience. The difference between chamber music and jazz is not one of quality, finesse, or virtuosity, but of two ways of life, which the people involved did not choose but were born into." Or Why I Love Uptown Girl by Westlife. So I don't know if you know who the band Westlife are, but they're an Irish boy band from the 90s who I initially was not a fan of. So I met Jolene and her mum Pauline in Brighton through running a music making course years ago. Jolene loves pop music, singing and playing the guitar, and wanted to do more music outside of the group sessions she was a part of. I wasn't a music teacher, music therapist, or anything like that, and it took a while to work out what we'd do in the sessions. But we knew when spending time with one another that music was the best way for us to communicate. So Jolene started coming round my house every Friday to make music. We messed around a lot, and I recorded a lot of what we did, using music technology not only to broaden what we could do, but also so we had a record of our time together, something her and her mum could listen to when driving or at home. In the sessions, she would sing or play guitar or keyboard, whatever was to hand. We'd listen to music together, and I would try and bring in elements of the songs she liked into the music we made. I would be experimenting with sounds and beats, trying to determine what Jolene liked. I was aware that making loose, avant-garde, improvised music could work really well, but that wasn't what Jolene listened to at all. Jolene had a speech therapist, and we would integrate words she was using there into songs, as well as using drawing to generate ideas. We developed a routine before each session. She would arrive with her guitar on her back. I would greet her and her mum at the door. She'd come in, we'd take off the guitar together, which we put on a chair, and she'd take a seat on my sofa. I would then offer her a drink. She'd reply, "Tea, please." Tea was a regular theme in her songs. And I'd pop off to the kitchen to make tea. Here's just one of her drawings as well that I put into the pamphlet. When I'd return, I'd ask if she wanted to listen to some music while we drank our tea. The first few weeks, the choices varied until she settled on Uptown Girl, a cover of the Billy Joel song by the Irish boy band Westlife. We'd sit there and sing along to it, get warmed up and relaxed for whatever we did next. I used to have an opinion on the quality of the song, even in comparison to the original, ways of talking about the production of it, the context, the people singing on it, the people releasing it. But as I sat there week after week with Jolene drinking tea and singing along to Westlife, I began to care less and less about any of that stuff. I didn't know how it had come into Jolene's life or how it became so important to her. We didn't have those conversations. Even if we could have, it would have missed the point. Now when I hear that song, I'm so into it and I sing along as I know all the words. This has happened so much over the years now that any resemblance of a well-curated taste in music has completely gone, and I really don't care. I think the realization of the privileges I had made me reevaluate my ability to reject mainstream culture and helped me question all the anger, frustration and despair I encountered through punk music, especially punk's nihilistic side. I think I concluded that the ability to say no and to reject mainstream culture often means that you have access to or the ability to create your own subculture or scene. If you don't have that ability or choice, then how do you or why would you say no to what surrounds you? I think the emotional connections we make to music and through music are sometimes undervalued. I developed a love of pop music through spending time with people that love pop music. I'm fascinated by how songs travel and communicate so far and wide, and how they can still be deemed bad music. I realized the most important thing I could do with Jolene was to support her to create pop songs, filtered through her and me and the way we both played. I think we managed it, and I still listen to the album we made to this day, and Westlife, obviously. I'll put a link to that album in this website as well. Yeah, it's great. I've got a link to the pamphlet if you would like to got advertise if you'd like to buy it on Rough Trade Books. Could even send a PDF to Annie if anybody wanted to it, because I don't want to exclude anybody from being able to access it. So, and then kind of the additional sort of context alongside this was that the same time that this pamphlet got published, I had like quite serious issues with my ear and hearing, like punctured eardrum and damage to the bones in my ear. And so I had surgery on it, and it meant that I had to take like 6 months out of being around any kind of loud music, which for me was like my entire sort of like, so I guess professional and social structure was around, be it going to gigs, you know, work. I was in loud spaces, in rehearsal spaces, and yeah, I met up with friends at gigs and played a lot, like had to cancel a lot of tours, and it really affected my, like I had to relearn how to like hang out with people and sort of have a social life and rethink a lot, because yeah, just sort of, was it worth me knowing that I was just permanently damaging my hearing through being so involved with this. So I'd always had like an artistic sort of painting practice, but I think I realized that I needed to kind of refocus, like find something where I could still carry on supporting people creatively, and also like be able to, you know, support my own like creative endeavors. Like one thing I really feel is quite important, that if I'm facilitating and supporting people in something, then I need to be doing that same thing. Kind of one, so I don't use it as a means to get my own sort of repressed creativity out, but also two, so I can kind of like understand the sort of creative process and basically what it, you know, takes to get something out into the world. But I still do a lot more painting, but still fold in music and drumming into my practice, but often at a much quieter volume. So here's just like some of like a recent thing that I did with some canvas and sort of expanded like painting, and then along with some like works from workshops that I'd been doing within Tate Modern during a residency that I did there, and then these drums which audiences were invited to play on, and then I invited some friends and musicians to come, and we kind of like did an afternoon of just improvising together. There's me playing the drum. Yeah, and this work is kind of me reflecting on the kind of nuances of support that I encounter while supporting people. So it's all kind of folds in and feeds itself, and it's kind of this constant reflection on roles and kind of like the way that you approach people and situations. It's kind of, yeah, me working through all this stuff. It's almost like can't have one without the other. Yeah, there's a drum kit that I painted and some work and some sculptural paintings that I've made. And here's a sort of excerpt from a video that I made of some performances that happened on that drum kit. So yeah, and that comes up to now, I think. So we're going to have like a 10-minute break, if that's all right. I hope everybody's okay.
Yeah, if everyone's happy, should we say we'll take a break until 3:30 and then come back for the rest of Richard's presentation? Okay.
Cool.
Have a good cup of tea, breath of fresh air, everyone. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, hope everyone's back from their break. I just started watching that video. Great, but I only got about a minute in.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Cool, great. Yeah, that video is from a project we did with the London Symphony Orchestra, and then the video in sort of from a project we did with Tate, which I'll talk about in a bit. Yeah, hope you all had a good break. Thanks for coming back. So carry on kind of talking about what I do now. So this is another one of my paintings, specifically thinking about a project that I did with a group of young people with an organisation called Heart and Soul. So yeah, alongside and intertwined with my artistic practice, I currently work for an organisation called Heart and Soul. So Heart and Soul believes in the power and talents of people with learning disabilities, and has existed as an organisation for 34 years now. It's based in southeast London, in Deptford, and its current home is in a place called the Albany. And the organisation kind of delivers very like local community-based work. So just providing creative opportunities for people from essentially the ages of 10 to infinity, like, you know, and creates projects where people can just come along and try things and get involved with making art and music, dance, drama, DJing, but then it also has quite a big, it's very ambitious in its kind of very international and very like forward thinking work. And so a lot of that involves long-term support for artists. So there are artists that we work with who have been involved since the beginning, so been supporting them for 30 odd years, to write, record, and share their music, and play all over the world, and create platforms for that work to be shared. Up until the pandemic, we were holding a club at the Royal Festival Hall on the South Bank every year, where sort of 3,000 to 3,500 people would attend, and that would, I think the most ambitious one, we took over all 5 floors, and we had bands playing on like every floor, like on balconies. We had DJs by the river, DJs, like 3 DJ sort of like setups in the main hall, and kind of music technology and chill out places like London Symphony Orchestra playing, and it's pretty like excessive and over the top. Well, not excessive, just over the top in a wonderful way. And I think I always like to say that Heart and Soul is really good at throwing parties. It's very party focused, and I think it's a really good inclusive and accessible sort of space to create, because it's kind of like 90% of people like to have a party. So I've been working with Heart and Soul for about 10 years now, just starting out as like just being a music facilitator, but now I'm an associate artist, and I kind of oversee and support creatively like all the young people's work, young people's projects, so that's like 10 to 25-year-olds. And the main focus of that is a project called Do Your Own Thing, and then we have lots of like other things going on around that. And yeah, I kind of do lots and lots of different things, so can support specific projects to happen. I help set up like partnerships with people, and sort of the navigations of, say, working with institutions, and kind of like try to like know everybody and know everything that's going on, to try and bring things together and make sure that there are opportunities for things to happen and things to be shared. But Do Your Own Thing, I'm just going to play a video because it's much better if the young people that make it talk about it rather than me. So here's a video about Do Your Own Thing.
Quiet on set, please. Roll the video.
So, what is Do Your Own Thing?
Do Your Own Thing is a fun and safe space
where you get to meet lots of different people and work together in the community.
And we meet up this Saturday this afternoon.
Who is it for?
It's for young people with learning disabilities aged 10 to 25.
That's a big age range.
Don't worry, we have an alternative universe called Young Stars. It's for 10 to 16, so you don't feel left out.
Wait, what happens at Do Your Own Thing?
Music!
We write songs, we perform, we play instruments at home, hooray!
Art!
And we do the art, and we do the painting, drawing, sculpting, and making everything.
Video!
Video is unique and fun at the same time. You can do whatever you want in video, like make it an action film.
Radio!
At Heart and Soul Radio, we talk about different topics, listen to cool music, and have a laugh and fun, and do some quizzes. Heart and Soul Radio!
DJing!
DJing is mixing songs, scratching, doing some cool effects.
So, what should I expect?
You should expect fun, creativity, conversations, and much, much more.
We work together as a family.
Do Your Own Thing is a place where I can share out with other people.
Sharing is important. Share with others, share with the world.
We have 2 clubs here, the Beautiful Opposite Club and the Split Club.
Squeaks Club! How do I join in?
Please just go to heartandsoul.co.uk if you want to find out how to join Do Your Own Thing.
So please come along and try and take part.
When lockdown is over, hopefully we can see each other in person again.
Let's have fun!
Let's have some fun!
Well, that was magnificent.
So that's Do Your Own Thing. And yeah, we've been running it online for the past 20 months. And it's been absolutely amazing. It's the Zooms are very lively. Every camera is on, every microphone is on, and everybody wants to be seen and heard. And it's like absolutely beautiful chaos. And remarkably productive. We'd sort of started doing it not knowing, like, you know, if anything was going to work at all, but so much stuff has been made, and just sort of, yeah, it's been kind of incredible to see how the young people have like fully adapted to it, and kind of having, you know, 50 people in breakout rooms, like making like videos and music and doing radio shows and stuff has been very, very cool. And I'll talk about actually one of the projects that we've done sort of during the kind of like the lockdown. So this is when we were in the Albany. This is kind of what it would look like. We'd have the whole theatre, and then a bunch of like breakout rooms. We have a music studio as well, like fully kitted out recording studio that we use, and kind of is the hub of a project called Sound Lab, which I forgot to talk about, but I'm also involved with that. So the way that music technology is used at Heart and Soul, I'm very involved with, and also again, like having partnerships with like music technology companies. So we used to run a lot of events where we'd invite those technology companies to basically show people how all the stuff worked. And so we have a really good relationship with Native Instruments, and we're going to be working with them around accessibility and helping them design new products and stuff. All being put on pause because of COVID, but the relationship is still there. I think somebody from Native is on our board now as well, so which is very cool. Here's a photo. I had to pick one where you can't see everybody's faces, of Squids Club, and that's in the same space, and we take over the whole of the Albany. So every single room is filled with, like, this is kind of a DJ space, which is like, as soon as people walk in, they're dancing. It's amazing. It's like the best club I've ever been to. There's like another space with just live music all night from the young people. Again, we have like spaces where there's just games, like, and we support young people to make their own games, and then they're on consoles. We have chill out rooms, which is very important. We also have a room for all the parents and carers where they can get massages. Again, very important. And kind of create support for them. It's incredible. And we do a lot of collaboration, and this is like, the sharing is important. It's kind of, we do a lot of, we work throughout the year, meeting, do your own thing and creating other things. But then Squids Club is the point where we can invite people in and really see what the project is about and what people do. And there's like usually like 300 to 400 people that come along to that. It's brilliant. Okay, so just in terms of like collaborations, so we've collaborated a lot with Tate and the schools and teachers department there. And this is one project that the young people named Never Bored, which was kind of like, we worked with them over a summer, kind of had a studio space, and so basically an open studio where they could just come and work whenever they wanted and just make stuff with no particular output. So one person made all these panda emojis. They're really into pandas. And then this other person, Sam, you can see that this series of self-portraits like cut out. This is just like one little section. There was so much stuff made. And then we were invited to basically put it up, and we kind of thought one of the best things we could do is kind of have that open studio thing. So we set up a studio in the Blavatnik building, and then invited people to work alongside the artists. So it wasn't like a workshop or anything. It was just like a relaxed, inclusive space where anybody can just kind of do what they wanted. Do your own thing. Just a side note is it's a very good thing to be kept to. So as a project, the name sort of dictates what you can do in it. And I've been called up before from being too directive about what people were doing, and somebody said, I thought this was called Do Your Own Thing. So it's very good because you're constantly just getting checked about actually you're led by the people that come to the project, and you know, if they don't want to do it, then it's like there's no point. And this is just a little photo of an artist talk that we did at the end of the day, and yeah, just that thing of getting people's voices in the space. And then after this, we played some of their music and we had a massive dance, and it was great. Yeah, and we've done about 3 sort of kind of projects with them, and unfortunately because of COVID we were going to be taking over the tanks for a big like sort of weekend takeover, but yeah, on pause. And then we've worked with the London Symphony Orchestra. So this is a picture of them, the members that we worked with, playing with some of the musicians at the South Bank. And this is a picture of artist called Lola, the video that I shared for the break. So this is her singing with also live visuals happening in the background. So somebody on a drawing app on an iPad, kind of creating the visuals. And kind of an interesting thing about the experience of working with musicians from the LSO is the drawing thing here. It became like the original thing was like the musicians were going to play, and then the person drawing was going to kind of follow or elaborate on what they were playing. And then we kind of like tried it the other way around, where actually it was like a live score being created on screen, and it was sort of up to the musicians to kind of like improvise on what that was and create the music to support that. It was amazing because it then put the power into the hand of the young person that was actually like drawing. Really like incredible experience. But I think what we discovered is there's a lot of like improvisation and kind of like listening and sort of working, and often things won't always be the same twice, but like all the young people are super comfortable with that, and it's kind of like that's the way that they work, and it's just it's way more about people being in the room and really like being together. But that we realized that was actually a real problem for a lot of the musicians in terms of improvisation wasn't a big part of what they did. And we had this intermediary musician called Jez, who was basically translating. He almost had to write scores for them to be able to improvise, and kind of they almost needed more support than the people, the young people we worked with. They were just like, give me a stage or give me a space to make music and away. But the musicians from the LSO actually needed a lot more support than the young people we were working with. And I think that sort of, harks back to that kind of thing around the meaning of like disability or disabled person, in that actually on a creative level, I feel like this idea of like anxiety over what people think of what you're making, over whether something's finished, over like this sort of fine detail of something, can really like hinder you in terms of making stuff. Whereas like I feel like a lot of people that I work with, there's none of that. It's like, given the opportunity to actually create some art or make some music, it's like no barriers whatsoever. Just we're getting on a stage in front of like hundreds of people, no rehearsals, and just performing and fully engaging with people. And I've seen that so many times, and it's this thing of like, I would not be able to do that. I would, have a complete meltdown, and and it's really, I think it's a really amazing space to be a part of, and I feel really, privileged to be able to sort of, be around people like that can just do things. And it's this interesting thing of that's flipped, that sort of the support is flipped in a creative sort of situation. And so a lot of that work is to actually get people onto the stage and get people into a space where they can make things, get resources there. There's just some feedback from some young people. Just keeping an eye on the time. So during lockdown, we did a residency on the White Pube, which is like a art criticism sort of website and social media channels. And the young people, we tried to figure out like what a residency, what that term means. And somebody came up with the idea that it was a plot of land and you can build anything that you want. And so we asked, like, what would you build if you had this land? And somebody said a 6-bedroom house. So, and everybody's really into that. And I guess we'd all been spending a lot of time in our houses. And so it's kind of that idea of like the house of do your own thing. So like if you had this house, what would you fill with it? And it became this really like amazing structure where you can kind of do anything. And then you can stick it in there. So if it's some music, put it on a radio. If it's a video, then you can put it on a TV. And some art, you just sort of build this space. It was really amazing. And we kind of carried on working on it when we had an opportunity to work with the South London Gallery. I think we asked if we could do a performance in like their back room. And then they were sort of, after we'd done it, so like this joke of, give us an inch and we'll sort of go a mile. So we ended up doing an installation in the main gallery over 2 days. This is a photo of what it looked like. And so there's loads of stuff that was made, from people's homes. And then they posted it to us and we scanned it and made all these like frames. There's like a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom and a bedroom. And we made a roof that we hung from the ceiling. There was like sound that we played into each of the rooms. And then on the sort of weekend of the exhibition, some young people involved with it, like did performances in the spaces. We recorded them and we had like videos as well that we made. We had like a month in August where we started seeing each other in person for the first time for 18 months. Very emotional, but it's very good, and the amount of stuff that was made is amazing. And that's the crew that they called themselves the Feel Good Designers. And then we also did a live stream tour of the gallery on the Saturday night, which was kind of absolutely sort of manic, big breakfast style thing, which was very, very fun. And that's on the South London Gallery YouTube, if you want to watch it. Okay, last 10 minutes. So a band project, friends that I work with a lot and have worked with for about, I think it's like 5 years now, is a band called Electric Fire. And I guess I see this as there's combination of do your own thing, because all the members met through that project. And then Sound Lab. So it was kind of lots of people that were interested in like electronic music or music technology. So there's Ahima, Sam, Alicia, and Will. And and sort of the combination of D.I.Y is privilege, because I wasn't in the band. Sometimes we'll be as a music facilitator, you might be like having to fill some gaps in terms of like supporting music to be made on stage and playing live. But with this band, I was kind of thinking, put in the time with the music tech, so that all worked for people, and that became the supportive element. So we use Ableton Live, And throughout the sort of the band existing, so I guess it started when like Will was like 14 and he's like 20 now, and he's about 1 million times better at using Ableton Live than I am. And we construct, I mean, he mainly now like constructs the songs, does a lot of production. Alicia sings and plays guitar as well. And then Sam, he's like an absolutely incredible pianist, like pitch perfect, but also absolutely loves like weird noise. So can play like Bach pieces, but put him on a synthesizer and it'd be like one note and a filter for ever or an arpeggiator, just go. And then Ahima is like incredible drummer and singer and sort of like energy, unbelievable amounts of energy. And then the busted eardrum bit is kind of, I think, realizing when that happened to me that I could be a barrier. Well, I kind of known this for a long time, but if I'm so involved in a project that I can't be there, and that means that, you know, this group of musicians cannot play, and I see that like as a failure of my like facilitation. Like I should be able to not be there because, yeah, the band isn't me. And so it was this thing of finding people that could also support them and kind of like sharing the knowledge of what is needed for them to be on stage. And one of those things is Will. And now he's like so amazing at Ableton that, you know, I usually mess things up when I start helping. Yeah, and so we've done loads of stuff. Like I guess the biggest thing we did a tour in Hong Kong, but we've also played like in mainland Europe. They've released 2 EPs now, and over lockdown we've met every single week from March 2020, and there was like differing levels of access to the internet and also devices. And so there's a lot of work initially just to get people on the internet. And I think the first time we got everybody on, and it took a long time of like figuring out who would need what and how would we get people to feel heard and all of this sort of stuff. How could we get Sam to be able to play keyboard on the Zooms and all of this sort of stuff. But we did finally do it, and it was a very felt like a big win. And we just thought if we got to see each other every week, that would be great. We could listen to some of our music. But no, they've basically written like over an album's worth of music. And there's a little video here about kind of a bit of the process of how we went about it. So.
Technology.
Yeah.
Songwriting with electric fire. Hello, I'm David and welcome to SoundLab TV. In this episode, we'll see how the Electric Fire crew, Alicia, Will, Sam, Ahima, Richard, and Thomas use Zoom and Ableton to collaboratively make music and write lyrics for their songs. Let's take a look, or should I say, listen.
Jumpy's next. I got some weird names. Right.
Will from the band shares his screen and pulls up a track he's been working on.
Oh, that is so up here, man. Very electrical.
They all listen to the track first to get the vibe.
Dude, what the?
Will already has a rough idea of how the vocals will go. That's smooth.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, that's just the thing I mess about with.
Oh yeah, that is so good.
Alicia, what does this make you think?
Hello. Saying
Maybe it's like nightclub sort of thing, like.
Yeah, fair enough. It is good. It is something.
Maybe something about dancing.
They all listen to the music to see how it makes them feel.
This is the more shake. Give it
Move my body.
Sounds like a party.
move my legs.
Move the leg and arm.
Everyone comes up with ideas, and these ideas become the lyrics to the song.
And legs as well.
There's so many ideas. 6 heads are better than one.
That's what we got. Yeah, move my body. Yeah, move my hands and my legs.
All has a go at fitting the lyrics to the music.
Ain't no stopping until we what?
Sometimes it can be tricky to get that last rhyme. Wonder if they'll crack it.
Ain't no stopping, this is our chance.
That's the one. Nice one, Thomas.
Yay! Got a natural singer in the room.
Love my feeling.
Make it happy.
Alicius, what are you singing there? Now my feeling.
It is much easier to come up with words when everyone works together.
I think
What am I feeling? What am I feeling?
Alicia sings a really nice melody.
Yes, Alicia.
Working together, they soon finish the words for the song.
I've got it, but you feel it, got it, I just
Ahima raps along.
get it, I just come. She come with the with the
Sometimes they do it the other way round and start with the words and do the music later. They still collaborate in the same way though. Let's have a look at the writing process behind the song Unbelievable Love.
What else could we say, Alicia?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Wow.
What can you say, Richard? What can you say?
Okay, what's the next word? It's impossible.
Impossible, angel. Impossible, giving people stronger. Yeah.
Make you people stronger. Funny word to use. Make you people harder.
Whoa.
Alicia, good one.
What do you think, Sam? What could we say next?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
That's brilliant. Okay. Will, have you got a beat for us? Unbelievable Love.
Yeah.
Once they have some lyrics, they improvise and jam and come up with musical ideas for the song.
It's incredible.
Yes, sir.
Alicia sings along and comes up with some catchy melodic hooks. A hook is a musical idea that is used in popular music to make a song appealing and to catch the ear of the listener. Ahima jams along on his drum pads.
People power.
They use Zoom to record everyone playing along and then put it all together in the computer later.
It's incredible.
This way, they can still have the feeling of playing together even if they're not in the same room as each other.
People power.
That's teamwork.
It's incredible.
That sounds like another Electric Fire party banger to me. Well, that's about it for this episode. We've seen how collaboration can be a lot of fun. Watch out for Electric Fire at a stadium near you soon. I'm David and this is Samlab TV. Keep your ears open. Bye.
Technology.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, don't want to replay that. That SoundLab TV, there's like 6 episodes working with different artists that we work with and have been working with online and kind of different processes that have come up. And one way that we were recording like stuff through Zoom. So just like taking the audio and going straight into Ableton. But then we were also getting people to record, like play along on WhatsApp. And then just sending us those recordings and then just dropping that into Ableton. And then I'll just play a little bit of kind of like the, I guess, finished demo. I think they want to re-record it in a studio properly, but this is something that was released as a part of a mixtape last year. So that's Alicia playing the keys. Stop that there because I'm running out of time. And I'll just play a little bit of, this is a video that was made in lockdown with like some 3D animation and filming outside of people's houses off their EP of the same name, Buzzin'.
Lovely, lovely. A Hema? What you doing? Yes! Let's play with your boy down here. I'm buzzing. I'm being good. I'm buzzing. Boogie all night. I'm buzzing. Good on. I'm buzzing. Good stuff. What you doing? Buzzing. Buzzing to the airport. The buzzer to the nose. The bus is cool. The bus is bed. The bus is the bus. The bus is the car. About time. The bus is come on now. The bus is the smile. Get ready. Get the red light. I'm buzzing. Buzzing. I'm buzzing. I feel good. I'm buzzing. I'm buzzing. I'm buzzing. The budget devil airport. The budget devil nose. The budget is good cool.
Stop that as well. Running out of time, but you can watch it later. It's amazing. And then, yeah, like 3 weeks ago, we met up for the first time in 20 months. And it's the sort of context of it is that I guess most of the members basically like things like clinically vulnerable or in houses where there was a clinically vulnerable person. So I guess we have carried on working online predominantly because there's a lot more risk with people that we work with. And so we've been a lot slower to getting back to doing stuff in person. We did a live filming at Battersea Arts Centre and they played 2 brand new songs. And I was very surprised that basically from doing all this work online, writing these songs and then kind of rehearsing them, is they got into a room together and basically the first time they played through the song, like they just played it perfect. I was just like, right, fine. It's amazing. And yeah, they did a 20-minute set and then there's going to be on the 19th of November, I can send a link to it. We'll have an event sharing basically that concert with 2 other artists, Danielle and Too Hot for Candy. And then just to finish, I just want to talk a bit about failure and how even though I've been doing this work for like 15 years, I get things wrong all the time, and I think it's a big part of it, but also that reflection and sort of folding in constantly, like thinking about everybody, approaching everybody and every situation like afresh. I think is a really important thing, and kind of unknowns is really important, and actually going on journeys like together to figure out and getting to know people. So this is a painting that I made after working with an artist called D.I.Y, and I was supporting her to make some music, and she was saying what I thought was jealous, beat again, let's get back together, and I kind of like just thought I knew what she was saying, and we recorded this song that ended up being called Jealous, and there's a breakdown. I was like, oh, what should we do in there? And I was like, well, why don't you spell out jealous? And so she's going Jealous, and then maybe like a few months later we were listening to the song in the office, and then somebody was just like, oh wait, is she just singing the band JLS? And they have a song called Beat Again, and it was kind of like this thing where I basically had, pushed something in a direction where like that hadn't been sort of brought to I hadn't listened properly, and I was kind of like had ended up sort of pushing something into the song which kind of wasn't there, and it's good because I just got the piss taken out of me, and chalked it up. The song's a banger, but it's so I made this painting to try and think about that sort of dynamic of support and stuff. And then there's a video here from Danielle now, who's supported by an artist called Rosie Ridgway, that recently won an award, but I don't know, maybe if we've got some time at the end I'll play it, but I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard. It was so fascinating. There's so much in there. Thank you so much for bringing your experiences and perspective and all this amazing, fantastic work you've done with these different groups of people and different people over the years. Wonderful. How are we doing? We've got 20 minutes left. Do people need a break before we go into the Q&A? Or can we push on? If anyone needs to step away for a moment, perhaps we can say you're free to do that. I think we've got a Q&A team of Unshawn. I think Unshawn is sick. Steve Stonehold, Tom Costello, Anya Peard, and Ben Thorne. Do you need do you need anything, or can you just turn on your cameras and mics? Do you need to share a screen or anything like that?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. Yeah, maybe we can share our screens.
Okay,
to
great.
show
I'm
questions.
gonna have to do that. Yes.
Yeah.
It's you, Anya. Rory, could you make Anya, Tom, Stephen co-hosts? Just in case.
I guess just one of
Ben,
us can
or
share
one
the
of
screen.
you. Yeah, maybe just. Is it you, Anya?
Yeah, you can share.
Sure, I can share it, yeah.
Great.
I just have to figure out. Oh, you do it, Stephen? Who do it?
Or Stephen. Okay, thanks, Rory. Great.
All right. Okay. How do I get to do that? Is there any way? How can I share my screen?
If you go to the bottom of the screen, there, can you see a green button that says share screen?
Yes, I can see it now. Okay.
And then if you have your PowerPoint open, you should be able to kind of select it.
All right.
Let you know.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. There it is. Perfect.
Nice.
So I guess I'll start reading the first question, which is, if I can manage to, there we go. So how can we recognize the artwork of people with disabilities without making the work about those disabilities?
That's a really good question. And I'm constantly thinking about that. I think one really good way of doing it is by asking what people want to do and then supporting them to do that. And I think often, especially when I first started, say engaging with like other organizations or institutions, it was often the ask is asking the people that we work with to reflect on disability. And it's kind of like actually given the space and time, people just want to make, the song Buzzing is just about having a really good time. There's no like forced kind of narrative of like because you are disabled by the world, you have to make work about that. And it's not to like diminish people that do make work specifically about it. But I think there's a lot in it of like flag waving in a way. Like, so I've had lots of conversations with people that identify as disabled, and then like support networks around. So that organization that I started called Constant Flux, there was for a long time discussing whether, when promoting the tour and stuff, whether we should even mention like learning disability or disability. But it was decided that actually it was really important for people to kind of announce that they were there, and kind of announce for other people that might feel really isolated, that might feel that they don't see themselves on stages and don't see themselves like, in kind of mainstream music, to actually be like, with the right support, or like, you can do this too. And again, that's for people that are in supportive roles. Like, for a lot of parents, there might be a lot of narrative forced on them about what their children can't do. And in a way to actually receive like benefits that can support them or their children throughout life, is like, you have to really focus on what people can't do so you can get that support. But to kind of like wave a flag for what people can do was really important. But in terms of like kind of like recognizing artwork of people with disabilities without making the work about those disabilities, I think it's kind of like not forcing narratives on people. And then, I mean, yeah, it's a good question that I don't necessarily specifically have the answer for. And I would love to not have to talk about it, but as I think it's something that does need to be talked about in a way. During the pandemic, like 60% of people that died, disabled people, but you don't often hear that. And so it is kind of like, because people can be so hidden and those narratives can be so hidden, there is like a certain importance of talking about it. So yeah, I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but
No, thank you very much. Maybe I can give it to Tom for the next question. That'd be all right?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Anya.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much. Everything was really interesting, and thank you for your work also.
Thank you.
So the next question, do you think there are obstacles in the mentality of the arts world that prevent people with learning disabilities from accessing it? Is there also a larger issue of unconscious stigma around disability that neurotypical people need to learn to deconstruct?
Very good questions. Oh my God. Okay, right. Yes, I think there are obstacles in the mentality of the art world that prevent people with learning disabilities from accessing it. I think there's a big emphasis on being able to explain yourself, being able to like make work and then explain what it is and the context with which it sits within. And obviously there is like a lot of language that is used in the art world that isn't necessarily, it's like not very widely understood. I think like a big word for me is the word pedagogy, where it's like I still haven't had like a good explanation of what that actually means, because I feel it's like teaching and learning, and those words are very like accessible and easily understood, whereas this word, it kind of instantly for me puts it into like a more academic world, which then excludes people. So there's things around language, there's things around like what I was talking about around like the sort of quality, and kind of like understanding that your notions of quality are constructed from your life experiences. So it's almost that kind of feeds into the like the sort of unconsciousness around like unlearning and deconstructing, is actually realizing that your tastes and the things that you think are like good have been constructed and built from your world and your life experiences and your like the things that have surrounded you. And then I guess on the larger issue of unconscious stigma, definitely. And I think it's like there's the sort of I think the way that I see a lot of stories around disability talked about, say, in media, is quite a good example, in that often there's kind of like two main narratives, and one is like, something where basically people are like essentially to be felt sorry for. There's kind of like something negative that's happened, so whether it's around hate crime or around like sort of benefits, or kind of like building negative narratives around what people's lives are like, and what the lived experience of like disability is like kind of very negative, or it's kind of very really exceptional, and kind of like kind of overcoming is a big narrative which gets used, of like overcoming disability. And I think that could be really problematic, because those two narratives don't allow people just to be like normal everyday people. And I think that's a big thing, that kind of like, because those stories are kind of fed to us, is that actually just recognizing people as people, although that sounds so like straightforward, that's one of the hardest things often to get, is to get people into a room and just get people to like take people as people. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you.
Also, maybe in a city like London, we're even less surrounded by people with disabled people and people with learning disabilities.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think, well, I mean, London, there is like, I'd say a lot of people, and, it's that thing about visible and invisible, like you don't, that thing, it's not always like present in being able to see, but it's the circles that you run in, the events that you go to. It's kind of like those questions around like, why aren't people visibly, like, why aren't people in this space? And it's interesting, because I think often, say around art world and things like that, often it's this thing of trying to create projects where kind of people can access this culture that has been decided is like good art and good culture, but it's like, who's decided that is, it's like institutions and museums and things like that creating projects where they're like trying to get people into the space because they think it's like good, but then actually, like, I've had experiences where it's like getting people into that space is a lot of work, and it's like people aren't really like that bothered, playing gigs in large institutions, which will take a lot of work, but actually people would much rather play close to home to their friends and family. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic of like, who decides like what people should be able to access.
Thank you. Stephen, do you want to take the next question?
Cheers, Tom.
So, working with punk bands, how is this binary of normal/abnormal or neurodivergency/neurotypical transformed during performance?
That's good. Tough question. Yeah, I'd maybe question like the binary, but I think what is interesting in my experience is this sort of is the performance, and I think it becomes really like I've had experiences where it feels very like apparent when watching some punk bands, kind of like the really performative like element of what it is, so like what communicates well as a punk band, you know, and like it's often that thing of you listen with your eyes, so you know, and actually the performing as a punk is as important as like how the music sounds. And I think again what I was saying about like really taking the opportunity to perform and be in front of people is kind of there seems to be like in my experience, say especially with PKN, is like the understanding of that performance is really present, and so actually kind of and Zombie Crash as well, like just understanding that you're on stage, you perform this role that you're taking on, and it communicates really well and people really get into it. And then like having watched lots and lots of punk bands where maybe that, you know, it isn't there and it's sort of almost shying away from understanding that performance is there, it kind of like really mutes what they're doing. Yeah, I don't know if that's, yeah, these questions are very tough.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you. Who wants to go next?
Oh, you've got lots of questions. I'm just a bit aware of time, and there's been one question from Eleanor in the chat as well. So do you want to ask a couple more, and then from the group, maybe you can choose kind of the most important ones. But thank you for this amazing work. They're really brilliant questions.
Yeah, really amazing. I wouldn't mind, like, you know, I could sort of type some stuff out afterwards, whatever, if it's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside of the lecture. Okay, so
do people like this question? Should we? I'm asking for the Q&A group. Are we happy with this one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go with this one.
Cool. Okay, so it feels as though an obstacle to inclusivity is ignorance. What would you think the first step of breaking that as an individual is? But putting yourself into like unfamiliar, potentially uncomfortable situations, you know, like doing the work of kind of like looking around you and seeing who you're surrounded by. I guess it's that thing of like there is these sort of worlds which all coexist at the, especially, you know, in London, like all coexist at the same time and you're not always aware of them. And yeah, like sort of seeking, like, you know, there's loads and loads of organizations which need volunteers, like if you're specifically thinking about disability, and kind of putting yourself into a situation where you can like meet people and talk to people and spend time with people, but also is that thing around, you know, the structural inequality is very, very present, and is to recognize that, you know, it's not like your fault, because it's the structures are set up to basically like to reduce those encounters in a way, for people not to necessarily be totally present in your life. And, you know, it's just the way that the care system is structured, the way that the benefits system is structured, the way that even like where houses are that people live in and supportive environments are, and the way that actually maybe people feel like they're not like able to go into, a classic one is, say, if somebody is unable to like be, not be verbalizing or making noise, to go into a gallery where there's these unspoken rules about you enjoy art by being quiet and taking things in, then they will not feel like comfortable in that space. So it's kind of like maybe doing some work around, like, if you are putting on events, like thinking about or talking to people about actually those things that you can change, and attitudinal changes that can sort of open up spaces and the way you communicate things and stuff. But seeking things out and seeking opportunities to be in different situations, I think.
Thank you.
Maybe we can read Eleanor's question that was in the group chat.
Yeah, I think it would be good.
So Eleanor asked, this corner of work really interests me. However, from a career point of view, do you need specific qualifications of training to teach in environments like this?
No, because I have like 0 qualifications. I think, the last qualification I got was like sort of a BTEC in play work or something. And I think that's a really, like, the biggest thing is like the understanding of like people as people, and kind of being very open, I think, is a really good trait. Being, like, as I said in the sort of manifesto, like being consistent is really important. So if you are gonna like a really good way to get involved in things is to volunteer. So it's how I got started. It's like everybody that I know that I've sort of maybe supported to get into this work, it's just like, come along, like volunteer and turn up and sort of keep turning up. And it's really difficult to say like this is a specific path, but it's like being really open, being willing to sort of like, live with unknowns, kind of like being willing to kind of like really listen and then think about how you can support something to happen. The volunteering with organizations and just like getting to know people. So people that run those organizations that work for them, but then also the people that they support. But no, you don't need any specific qualifications. I think it's like learning on the job is good, a good way to do it. And I guess that whole thing about reflection is being really open to like, keeping it like, if you do start doing it, like keeping a journal and being really like present in thinking about what your interactions were, positive or negative, and kind of, think about that a lot. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop all these fantastic questions and answers to such a good conversation. If you've got more questions, you could pass them to me and I can pass them to Richard, and I think other people might be interested in answers too, so I could put those on the Padlet afterwards. If you don't mind doing that, I think people would be really appreciative. There's no deadline, so just maybe if the Q&A group want to email me those, I can pass them on. Richard's email is also on his website too, I think.
I mean, it seems as though that there could be a really like fruitful conversation to be had. So I feel like that might maybe self-organizing or something organized with LCC, where like bringing some people together and like thinking about those questions and thinking. And I think it's really important to say as well, I was going to say this at the beginning, in terms of asking questions and kind of approaching stuff, is that thing about getting things wrong. It's like access is like, it's not about getting things right and making a perfectly accessible environment. It's about listening to people. it's about being open to change and believing people and believing their experience in terms of like, what is difficult for people. So it sounds like there could be a really like fruitful conversation there. So.
Yeah, that would be great if something could be organised, or we could have you back at some point, Richard. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm afraid, we'll have to wrap it up there. But thank you so much, Richard, for your fantastic presentation. I hope everyone has the link in case you want to revisit anything. Here it is again from the presentation. Brilliant questions. Thank you so much to our Q&A group. Thanks very much, Rory, for the technical support. And have a lovely rest of time in Malta, Richard. And I'll see you all next week when we have Lucia Chung as our guest. So see you all next Thursday. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.